Hello, my name is Beck and welcome to a video where I talk about some of the series that really grew on me. Most of the books in this video I've given about 4 or 4.5 stars. One of them I've even given about 3 stars, and I continued on with the rest of these series and I ended up giving the rest of the books in the series either 4 or above. I just wanted to talk about those so I could recommend some series to you, because I know in starting a series sometimes it's hard to commit to if you didn't absolutely adore the first book, and I just wanted to encourage you to start and continue these series because I ended up really loving them. The first one in this video is Every Heart a Doorway by Seanan McGuire, and this is a book that I've talked about on my channel before. It is a little novella of a novella series. Like I said, I gave this one about 4 stars, and then I gave the next two about 4.5, and then the most recent book, In an Absent Dream, I gave 5 out of 5 stars. So I ended up absolutely adoring this book. It is the concept in this series that keeps me coming back and revisiting it and wanting more, because this follows a bunch of characters who have gone to their ideal worlds in their own versions of Narnia, and then they've had to come back and reassimilate with normal everyday society, and it hasn't really worked out for them because they can't assimilate very well back into normal society after experiencing these perfect fantasy worlds that are pretty much crafted to suit their personalities. So because of this struggle, there is a character in this series who is now an adult, and she has created this, not institution, more of a school that these characters can go to and find like-minded people and people to relate to. This headmistress of the school has also been back and forth between her own fantasy world and our reality too, so she can really relate to her students on that level as well. And I really like the diversity in this book. The main character in this first novel is actually asexual, and there's a lot of gender and sexuality diversity and racial diversity in this series, which is what I really enjoyed about it. It wasn't the key thing that I enjoyed, but it was an awesome bonus, and I really loved seeing that written on the page. The other thing that I really enjoyed was that it doesn't follow just one character, so you get introduced to a bunch of different characters in the first novella, and then we follow a different key character each time in each novella, and that's probably why I love the fourth book more than the rest of them, because it followed a character that I really liked and a world that was really dark and interesting with the goblin market. And I don't want to say too much because obviously it'll spoil you. I want you to find out about these unique worlds all on your own, because I didn't really know too much about them going in, except for the general concept and that the character was asexual. So I don't want to spoil anything for you, because these characters in this world really grows, and it's so nuanced. And there's different types of fantasy world as well, so there's some that have logic or high logic or magic, and it's just so interesting and so rich. And I want there to be more than 8 novellas in this series. There are currently being more written, and I don't know if it's going to exceed 8 or not. I just want Seanan McGuire to write more and more, because I'm absolutely addicted to this world, and I want everyone else to be as well. The next book that I'm going to recommend is actually a graphic novel, and it is Sagar by Brian K. Vaughan and Fiona Staples, and this is probably surprising that I'm recommending it in this video, because I have said before that I love this series so much, and that is definitely true, but I did give this one 4 stars, and then the rest of the series I've given pretty much 5 stars overall to every other volume, and there are 9 so far. This has really high praise from me, and it follows 2 characters who are from a warring moon and a warring planet, and then they end up getting together and having a child named Hazel, and this child named Hazel actually narrates the story, even though the 2 parents are really present in the story. And it's just really interesting and really funny, and it's really graphic as well, so it's definitely 18 plus. If you are concerned about sex and violence, probably give this one a miss, or just be aware of that before you start it, because it doesn't really hold anything back in terms of what it conveys, and it's very honest and raw in that way, and I really like it for that reason. It's really deep as well in terms of character, and it explores things in a very humane way based on relationships and family and grief and longing and love, and it's just so beautiful. So even though it has those moments of darkness and humor, it can balance it really well, and that's why I keep coming back. I really need to reread them as well, because Fiona Staples' art is just absolutely beautiful, and I love flicking through these just to revisit her art, so a reread is definitely in order. I also would highly recommend reading these, so this is why I wanted to include them in my video, just really so I could push more people to read Saga if you haven't yet already. Now, the next book in this series is actually an adult sci-fi series, and it's The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet by Becky Chambers. I read the first 2 books, I believe, early this year or maybe the end of last year, and I listened to those on audiobook, and they were phenomenal. I adored them. I gave the first book, like I said, 4 stars out of 5 instead of 5 out of 5, but I think the world and what it touched on was really incredible. Without giving too much away, because this is a very slow burning story, so I don't want to give away any key elements to it, we follow a bunch of characters and they are on a spaceship and they've been basically offered the job of a lifetime. Their job is to punch holes through space and create wormholes so that spaceships can get from one place to another without too much time lost in between. So to do that, they have to go on these really long hauls to these points in space and punch through holes in space. And I don't know if that makes too much sense. I think you have to read it to get a little bit more context, but it follows a bunch of characters on this crew and there's a lot of, again, gender diversity and racial diversity, especially interspecies, because there are alien species in this series as well. In addition to all of this crew, there is also an artificial intelligence that is installed on the ship and her name is called Lovey. So I really like that it explores also humanity like Saga did, and it explores it in a more heartfelt and existential way. I really love how it explored humanity and being genuine and honest to yourself as well as respectful of other people. It was just really interesting and I'm really looking forward to whatever she puts out next because I just adore her soft touch and she can convey so much with so little and I just love her for that. So this series is actually a companion series, so I can't wait to devour what she has coming out next. But before I move on, this series is actually a companion series and I would recommend reading them in order regardless. So it's this one and then A Closed and Common Orbit and then Record of a Spaceborne Few. So that is the order I would recommend reading them in because at the end of this book is a really key spoiler for the beginning of the second book. And even though these books do follow different characters, they are minutely linked, so you will be spoiled if you read them out of order. So I would recommend reading this one first and delving into this world and these planets and these characters. It is just so beautiful and I can't recommend this series enough. Becky is amazing. And then second last in this video, we have The Bone Season by Samantha Shannon, and she's actually the author of The Priory of the Orange Tree, which is a standalone adult fantasy book that came out this year. And this is her series, it's her urban fantasy series, and this is set in a place called Scion, London, and it's kind of a regressed but also futuristic dystopian society set in London, obviously, and we follow our main character, Paige Mahoney, and Paige is actually a clairvoyant, and in this world, clairvoyants are actually criminals. They're classed automatically as criminals and it's illegal to practice clairvoyance, but there's a whole underground society of clairvoyants and clairvoyant clientele and ghosts, and it's just really interesting in terms of her world building. There is a lot packed into this first book, and there's a glossary at the end that I didn't particularly read when I was reading The Bone Season, but I picked things up as I went along, and obviously I've continued this series. The Mime Order delves a lot more into the politics and the nitty-gritties of the clairvoyant world and the underground world, which I really, really loved. And then the next book obviously continues on from that too. So I did give The Mime Order and The Song Rising books 2 and 3 in this series 5 out of 5 stars each, and I can't wait to continue this series as well. The fourth one is currently being written and there is going to be 7 in the series, I believe, so we do have a little bit of a way to go with this one. But if you see this hyped up a lot, because I saw it on BookTube and just on Book Instagram a lot, I would recommend picking it up because it is a really enjoyable one. It's a bit different as well, and even though I kind of predicted the trajectory of this first book, I didn't predict anything in the next ones, so I'm really happy that I continued on with this series because it has got such an interesting touch and an interesting magic system. Even though it tackles a very common kind of theme of ghosts, it does it in a very unique way, and that's one of the things that I loved about this. I also love Paige, but I don't want to go into too many reasons why because you really find out about her growth in this first book. So definitely pick up this series if you haven't picked up The Bone Season yet because it is very enjoyable and I can't wait for the next installments. And now we have come to the last book in this series, and it is actually by one of my favourite authors, so you might be surprised to see it. But it is Magnus Chase and the Gods of Asgard, and this is the first book, The Sword of Summer, and this is the Magnus Chase series, and Magnus is actually the cousin of Annabeth, who was in Rick Riordan's Percy Jackson series, and this is a separate series and it follows Norse mythology rather than Greek mythology. I unfortunately only gave this about a 3 stars or 3.5 stars when I initially read it, and I read it physically, and I read the second book physically as well, and I gave that about a 4, and then the last book I read while I was traveling and I listened to it on audiobook, and it was just so much fun and it grew so much, and I ended up giving 5 out of 5 stars. I adored it and I just wanted more, but apparently it's only a trilogy, so this series, like the Percy Jackson series, has many multitudes of characters in it. It has a bunch of adventure and a lot of humour to it, so I would recommend these if you're wanting a laugh. I did find the humour a little bit overdone in the first book, and I think it was just me kind of trying to adjust to Norse mythology and a new main character rather than Percy. So I was just used to the previous series by Rick Riordan, so I think if you wanted to start here you could. It might spoil you for the Percy Jackson and the Olympian series as well if you continue on reading this series, because it does have a few throwbacks and a few mentions to characters, so just be aware of that before you start this series. But I really enjoyed this one. It has Rick Riordan's classic tone of humour, but also realism to it in the characters and how they struggle with emotions and family and everything like that. And it also has a couple of diverse characters in it as well, which is what I really love to see. Rick has really grown in his platform, in his readership, and he tries to incorporate as many kinds of people and as many readers as possible in the way he represents them. For example, one of the friends that Magnus has in this is deaf, so there's a lot of sign language in this book, but there's also a Muslim main character as well that we get to follow too. And I love her friendship with Magnus, and the fact that she's a Valkyrie is really awesome. I don't want to say too much about what happens in this series, but in the first couple of chapters, Magnus is already in a fight for his life, and it is very, very good and very fast paced and just a lot of fun. So even though I didn't really love this starting out and I was a little bit skeptical to continue, I'm really glad that I just bit the bullet and jumped in because I have no regrets, and I actually really want to reread this series and see if my thoughts on the first book have changed. So definitely read Magnus Chase if you have read the Percy Jackson books already. And there you go, these are all the series that I've loved and that have grown on me, and I'm really glad that I actually bit the bullet and continued all of them. So if any of these are sitting on your shelf, please just continue reading them because they are 100% worth it. I loved every second, and I can't wait to reread and continue a lot of these series as well. So definitely let me know if they're sitting on your shelf. I'd love to hear from you, and thank you so much for watching this video, and I'll talk to you in my next one. Bye.